October 1969, RCA Studios, Nashville, Tennessee, 3:47 a.m. Elvis stands in Studio B, alone. His hand rests on the music stand. 7 pages of sheet music. 7 songs Colonel Parker demanded he record. 7 songs Elvis will never sing. Not today, not ever. The question isn't whether Elvis was rebellious. He wasn't known for defiance. The question is, what made him draw the line? What made him risk everything he'd built? What made him look his manager in the eye and say, no? Tonight, we'll discover those 7 songs. The words Elvis refused to sing, the melodies he rejected, the artistic stand that almost destroyed him. But there's something else, something Colonel Parker kept hidden for decades. One of those refusals saved Elvis's legacy. Another nearly ended his career before his 1970 comeback. And the final song on that list? It was never about music at all. By the end, you'll understand why Elvis Presley, the man who gave the world everything, held back these 7 pieces of himself. And you'll know what Colonel Parker threatened to do when Elvis said no. Let's begin. Studio B is empty now. The musicians left hours ago. The backing singers went home. Even the sound engineers clocked out. Just Elvis and the 7 songs. He picks up the first sheet, reads the title. His jaw tightens. This isn't music. This is a calculation, a formula. A product designed to sell, not to mean anything. He sets it down, picks up the second, reads 3 lines. His stomach turns. Words he could never say. Not to his fans, not to himself. He moves to the 3rd, the 4th, the 5th. Each one worse than the last. By the time he reaches the 7th, his hands shake. Not from exhaustion, from anger, from knowing what this means. The door opens. Colonel Tom Parker steps inside. Black suit, white shirt, bolo tie, cigar smoke trailing behind him. He doesn't smile. He rarely does when money is involved. Elvis, we have a schedule. Elvis doesn't turn around. His voice is quiet. I'm not singing these. Parker walks closer. His shoes echo on the studio floor. Leather soles on tile. Sharp, precise. We have contracts, my boy. 7 songs, 7 singles. RCA is expecting them by November. Elvis finally turns. His eyes meet Parker's. I don't care what RCA expects. I'm not singing them. The room goes silent. 5 seconds, 10, 15. Parker takes a long drag from his cigar. The tip glows orange in the dim light. He exhales slowly. Then we have a problem. Quick thought. Have you ever refused to do something you knew was wrong, even when it cost you? Drop a comment. To understand why these 7 songs mattered, you need to understand 1969. Elvis is 34 years old. He hasn't performed live since 1961. 8 years away from the stage, 8 years of movies, 31 films in those 8 years. Most of them forgettable. Some of them embarrassing. But they made money. $150 million in box office receipts. Colonel Parker's cut, $37.5 million, 25% of everything Elvis earned. That was the deal. But something changed in Elvis in 1968. December 3rd, 1968. NBC airs the Elvis 68 Comeback Special. 42 million viewers. The highest-rated show of the year. Elvis in black leather, raw, real, dangerous again, not the movie star, the artist. And for the first time in years, Elvis remembered who he was. Not just an entertainer, a musician. The comeback special reignited something in him, a hunger for authenticity, for songs that meant something, for performances that mattered. He started planning his return to live performances. Las Vegas, the International Hotel, July 1969. 57 consecutive sold-out shows. Elvis proved he could still command a stage, still move a crowd, still matter. But Colonel Parker saw things differently. He saw a product line that needed diversification. Movies were declining in profitability. Concert revenues were good but seasonal. What they needed was singles, hit singles, radio play, chart positions. And Parker had a formula. Step 1. Find songs that fit current trends. Step 2. Record them quickly and cheaply. Step 3. Release them monthly. Step 4. Maximize revenue per recording session. Art wasn't part of the equation. Quality wasn't a variable. Just output. Just sales. Just money. And that's how the 7 songs ended up on Elvis's music stand that October night. Parker had selected them himself, not for artistic merit, not for how they fit Elvis's voice, for market potential, for demographic targeting, for calculated commercial success. Song number 1, Disco Inferno Presley, a proto-disco track, written by a Nashville songwriter trying to predict the next trend. Fast tempo, repetitive lyrics, synthesizer heavy. Everything Elvis hated about the direction of popular music. The lyrics included the phrase, "Shake it like the king," repeated 47 times. Not metaphor, not poetry, just a catchphrase designed for radio repetition. Elvis read it once, set it aside, never looked at it again. Song number 2, Bubblegum Love, a teenage romance song, aimed at the 13 to 16 demographic. Parker's market research showed that's where the money was. Young girls buying singles, young girls buying posters, young girls at concerts. But Elvis was 34, married, a father. The idea of singing, "You're my bubblegum baby, sweet and pink," made him physically ill. It wasn't just the lyrics, it was the principle. He had spent 15 years building credibility. This would destroy it in 3 minutes. Song number 3, Political Blues. This one was different. Not commercial pop. Political commentary about the Vietnam War, about student protests, about civil unrest. Parker thought it would position Elvis as relevant, socially conscious. But Elvis knew better. He had friends who served in Vietnam. He had fans who lost sons there. He had fans who protested the war. Taking a side would alienate half his audience. More importantly, he didn't know what side he was on. The song pretended he did. It put words in his mouth, opinions he hadn't formed, beliefs he hadn't chosen. That's not artistry. That's propaganda. And Elvis refused to be a mouthpiece. Song number 4, Jesus Loves Rock and Roll, a gospel rock fusion. An attempt to capitalize on both Elvis's gospel roots and the Jesus movement sweeping America. On paper, it seemed perfect. Elvis loved gospel. He loved Jesus. He sang hymns at home. He prayed before every show. But this song wasn't reverent. It was exploitation. It used sacred imagery to sell records. Jesus in bell-bottoms was an actual lyric. Christ behind the drum kit, keeping heaven's beat was another. Elvis grew up in the Assembly of God Church. His faith was private, deep, personal. This song turned it into a gimmick. He wouldn't do that to his mother's memory. He wouldn't do that to God. Song number 5, The Colonel's Cash. This was the strangest one. A novelty song about a character called the Colonel, a Southern gentleman who loved money and cigars. Parker commissioned it himself from a songwriter he'd worked with before. The idea, create a character-driven song cycle. Elvis as the Colonel, a series of singles, each one telling a story. Build a brand within a brand. But Elvis saw through it immediately. This wasn't about character. This was Parker trying to write himself into Elvis's art, to make himself immortal through music, to ensure his own legacy. Elvis read the lyrics twice, once in disbelief, once in anger. Then he laughed. Not with humor, with bitterness. "You want me to sing about you? That's what this is?" Parker didn't deny it. "Think of it as brand synergy, my boy." Elvis shook his head. "I'm not your advertising." Song number 6, Redneck Revolution, a Southern rock anthem, heavy guitars, rebel yells, Confederate imagery. The song wasn't explicitly political, but it flirted with symbolism. Stars and bars appeared in verse 2. Heritage, not hate, in the bridge. In 1969, America was fracturing along racial lines. Martin Luther King Jr. had been assassinated 18 months earlier. Cities had burned. Schools were integrating, and Elvis Presley, the white boy who sang black music, who grew up in a black neighborhood, who credited black artists as his influences, was being asked to sing coded language. He read the song once, just once. Then he tore it in half, top to bottom, clean tear. He dropped both pieces on the floor. No words, no explanation. The answer was in the action. Song number 7, Goodbye, Graceland. This was the one that broke something in Elvis. A ballad, slow, melancholic, beautiful in structure, about leaving home, about saying goodbye to a life you loved, about moving forward even when it hurts. The problem wasn't the song itself. The problem was the context. Parker wanted to release it as Elvis's farewell single, plant the idea of retirement, create scarcity, drive up demand, then bring Elvis back for a final tour, then a final album, then a final concert. Milk the goodbye for years. Elvis understood immediately. This wasn't a song. This was a trap. Once you announce the end, you can never stop announcing it. You become a nostalgia act, a legacy performer, not an artist, a relic. And Elvis, at 34, wasn't ready to be a relic. He set the sheet music down carefully, looked at Parker. His voice was steady. I'm not singing any of these. Parker's expression didn't change. Then you're not recording. RCA has a contract. 7 songs by November 15th. That's 6 weeks from now. If you don't deliver, you're in breach. They'll sue for damages. Estimated loss, $2 million, plus legal fees, plus reputational damage, plus the collapse of your Vegas contract. The International Hotel has a morals clause. Breach of contract with RCA could trigger it. You'd lose everything. Elvis stood there, silent, calculating. Parker continued. Or you could sing the songs. Record them in 2 days. Fulfill the contract. Make everyone happy. Keep your career intact. It's 7 songs, Elvis, 3 minutes each, 21 minutes of singing. Is your pride worth $2 million? The studio was silent again, the air thick with smoke and tension. Elvis picked up, Goodbye, Graceland, looked at the title one more time. Then he spoke. His voice was different now. Not angry, not defeated, clear. Colonel, I've given you 15 years. I've sung songs I didn't love. I've made movies I didn't respect. I've smiled when I wanted to scream. I've done it all for the career, for the fans, for the money. But these 7 songs? They're not about the career. They're about erasing who I am. And I won't do it. Sue me if you have to. Destroy my career if you want. But I'm not singing them. Parker didn't move. He took another drag from his cigar, exhaled slowly, watched the smoke rise to the ceiling. Then he nodded. Just once. Very small. We'll find other songs, but this will cost you. Elvis nodded back. I know. Parker turned and walked to the door, his hand on the handle. He paused. You know what the real problem is, Elvis? You still think you're an artist. You're not. You're a brand. And brands don't have integrity. They have market value. The sooner you accept that, the easier this gets. He left. The door closed behind him. Elvis stood alone in the studio. 7 sheets of music on the stand. 7 songs he'd never sing. He picked them up. All 7. Walked to the trash can in the corner. Dropped them in. One by one. Then he sat at the piano. The same piano he'd played as a child at the Assembly of God Church. A Baldwin Spinet. Moved to the studio specifically for him. He played a chord. Just one. Let it ring. Then he started to sing. Not one of Parker's songs. His own words. Improvised, raw, real. A song about cages. About freedom. About the cost of saying no. Nobody recorded it. Nobody heard it except him. But it was the most honest thing he'd sung in years. What happened next took 6 weeks. Colonel Parker made good on his threat. Partially. He couldn't actually sue Elvis. The contract was with RCA, not with Parker personally. And RCA, despite Parker's claims, wasn't ready to destroy their most profitable artist over 7 songs. But Parker found other ways to punish the refusal. He started small. Cancellations. 3 radio interviews, canceled. 2 TV appearances, postponed indefinitely. A planned Christmas special, creative differences. Then he went bigger. The Las Vegas contract for 1970. Parker renegotiated, without Elvis's knowledge, changed the terms. Elvis would now perform 120 shows instead of 60. Same pay. Double the work. When Elvis found out, he was furious. But the contract was signed. Parker had power of attorney, legal authority to make deals on Elvis's behalf. Elvis was trapped. He could fire Parker, but Parker's contract gave him 25% of everything Elvis earned, even future earnings, for life. Firing him wouldn't free Elvis. It would just make Parker a silent partner, taking money without doing work. So Elvis was stuck, and Parker knew it. The 7 songs disappeared. Literally, Parker had all copies destroyed. The original sheet music, the demos, even the songwriter contracts. He wanted no evidence that Elvis had refused anything, no paper trail of rebellion, because if one refusal became public, others might follow. And Colonel Parker's entire business model depended on one principle. Elvis Presley does what he's told. But something unexpected happened. In November 1969, Elvis went back to RCA Studios with his own songs, 7 of them. Not Parker's choices, his own. Songs he'd been writing for months. Songs about loneliness, about fame, about the cost of being Elvis Presley. The engineers were shocked. Elvis never brought his own material. He always sang what was given to him. But that November, he recorded 7 of the most personal songs of his career. RCA didn't know what to do with them. They weren't commercial. They weren't radio-friendly. They were too honest, too raw, too real. Parker convinced RCA to shelve them. Not the right time for this sound, he said. The tapes sat in a vault, unreleased, unheard, for 13 years. In 1982, 5 years after Elvis's death, RCA was doing an inventory of unreleased material. They found the 7 songs from November 1969. A producer named Joan Deary listened to them. She was 54 years old, had worked with Elvis in the early 60s, hadn't seen him in over a decade. She pressed play on the first song. Elvis's voice filled the room. Not the Vegas Elvis, not the movie Elvis, the real Elvis, vulnerable, honest, broken open. She listened to all 7 songs, twice. Then she called the label executives. These need to be released. They hesitated. Elvis had been gone for 5 years. The market had moved on. New wave, punk. Disco's death. Nobody wanted ballads from a dead king. But Joan insisted. She spent 6 months fighting. Finally, in 1983, RCA released the songs as a compilation album. Elvis, The Lost Sessions. No promotion, no fanfare. Buried release. The album sold 47,000 copies in the first year. Not a hit, not a failure, just forgotten. Except by the people who heard it. Music critics called it the most honest Elvis album ever made. Fans wrote letters to RCA. This is the Elvis we needed. Why didn't we hear this when he was alive? One of the 7 songs, Prison of Light, became a cult classic. Covered by over 30 artists, including Bruce Springsteen in 1987, Johnny Cash in 1994. It's still performed today, still relevant, still powerful, because it wasn't written to sell, it was written to survive. The other 6 songs from Parker's list, the ones Elvis refused, most of them were eventually recorded, not by Elvis, by other artists. Disco Inferno Presley was reworked and given to a group called the Memphis Flash. They recorded it in 1970. It flopped, sold 1,200 copies. Bubblegum Love went to a teenage pop group, the Candy Hearts, released in 1971. Did slightly better. Peaked at number 87 on the Billboard Hot 100. Forgotten by summer. Political Blues was never recorded. Too controversial. Too specific to 1969. outdated by 1970. Jesus Loves Rock and Roll was rewritten as a children's Sunday school song, without the rock elements, without the edge, just a simple hymn. It's still sung in some churches. Nobody knows it was almost an Elvis song. The Colonel's cash was destroyed. Parker himself burned the only copy. Once Elvis refused it, Parker realized how transparent it was, how embarrassing. He never mentioned it again. Redneck Revolution was picked up by a Southern rock band in 1975. They changed some lyrics, made it more explicitly political. It caused controversy. Radio stations refused to play it. The band broke up 6 months later. And Goodbye Graceland? That one had the strangest fate. In 1976, a year before Elvis died, Parker approached him again. Same song, same pitch. One final album, one farewell tour. Elvis was exhausted, sick, addicted to prescription drugs. His marriage had fallen apart. Lisa Marie was living with Priscilla in California. He barely saw her. He weighed 260 pounds, could barely perform. Some nights he forgot lyrics to his own hits. And Parker showed him Goodbye Graceland again. Elvis held the sheet music, older now, yellowed with age. He read it, slowly, every word. Then he looked at Parker. You really thought this would work? Parker shrugged. It still could. Elvis handed it back. His voice was quiet, tired. If I sing this, I'm admitting it's over, and I'm not ready for that. Not yet. Parker took the sheet music, put it back in his briefcase. They never spoke about it again. 11 months later, Elvis was dead. August 16th, 1977, bathroom floor at Graceland. Heart failure, 42 years old. Goodbye, Graceland. But not the song, the place, the life, everything. After his death, Goodbye, Graceland was leaked to the press. Journalists found it fascinating. The song Elvis refused to sing. The goodbye he wouldn't say. Paul Simon heard about it. He'd been working on an album, thinking about legacy, about mortality, about leaving things behind. In 1986, he released an album called Graceland. The title track is about a pilgrimage to Elvis's home, about memory, about loss, about what we leave behind. Simon never confirmed it, but musicians who knew him say Goodbye Graceland inspired it, that Elvis's refusal created space for someone else's masterpiece. Quick thought. Have you ever seen someone's courage inspire you years later, even though you never met them? Drop a comment. Today, the 7 songs Elvis refused to sing are studied by music historians. They're taught in songwriting classes as examples of commercial music versus artistic integrity. The original sheet music for 3 of them survived. They're in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, Cleveland, Ohio, behind glass, yellowed paper, handwritten notes in the margins, Elvis's handwriting. No. Wrong. Not me. Museum visitors stop and look. Read the lyrics. Try to imagine Elvis singing them. They can't. Because he never did. And that's the point. Some things are more important than success. Some refusals define you more than acceptances. Elvis gave the world 1,000 songs, but the 7 he wouldn't sing, those might be the most important, because they show that even at the height of control, even under Colonel Parker's thumb, even when threatened with losing everything, Elvis Presley drew a line, and he didn't cross it. Not for money, not for fame, not for Colonel Parker. In 1993, a music journalist named Peter Guralnick interviewed Red West. Red had been Elvis's friend since high school. Bodyguard, confidant. He was there the night Elvis refused the 7 songs. Guralnick asked, "Why did those 7 songs matter so much?" Red thought for a long time. Then he said, "Because Elvis knew something the rest of us forgot. You can sell your voice. You can sell your image. You can even sell your time. But once you sell your soul, you can't buy it back." Those 7 songs would have required Elvis to sell his soul. So he said no. And in saying no, he saved something essential. Not his career. That was never in real danger. Not his legacy. That was already secure. He saved himself. The part of him that was still real, still honest, still Elvis, not the brand, not the product, not the king, just a man from Tupelo, Mississippi who loved music and refused to let it become meaningless. Today, if you visit Graceland, they don't talk about the 7 songs. The tour guides don't mention them. The exhibits don't display them. But musicians who come to pay respects know the story. Songwriters, producers, artists struggling with commercial pressure. They stand in the jungle room where Elvis fought those battles. They look at the piano he played, and they remember that sometimes the most important thing you can do is refuse, politely, firmly, absolutely. And unfortunately, they don't make men like Elvis Presley anymore.